So if we drop the saturation, let's rein it in to the middle blue there. Now it's a more neutral looking blue. We can rotate the saturation. Oh, look, it pops into magenta right in the middle, red right in the middle, yellow right in the middle, green right in the middle, and cyan right in the middle. Hey, this is Adam with Tech Dive AV Club. We are in Vegas Pro 18, but I'm also talking about movie studios and really Vegas in general. However, it will need to be a newer version of Vegas to have all the color tools that I'm talking about. Today we're going to talk about color, general color tools and power that Vegas has, and some things that you probably don't know about Vegas and its use of color. What we are not talking about, because I don't want anybody disappointed, I have a separate tutorial all about color grading. And we are going to talk about color wheels and things a little bit, but this is not a tutorial about color correction or color grading, about how to do those and the workflow involved. I have two separate tutorials about those for both movie studios and Vegas Pro, and I will link those below. So first off, in the media generators, you can just have a generated color as a video, and you can grab any of these colors and turn them into any other color. So I have one here. And if you select this Media Video Generators button, you actually have a lot of tools here. You may not know this, but you can actually select different color spaces. And let's talk about why that's important. So what a color space is a way of understanding how the different colors are going to relate to each other in the computer and versus all the different colors your eye can see and how many colors you have access to. And so if you're doing color pickers and stuff, that's actually going to change how those work. So this right here, this big loopy thingy is what you usually see when this is all the colors an eye can see if it's in a normal, non-colorblind person. But this little thing right here is called a color space, where this is all the colors that RGB or like sR. This actually I think is sRGB, but RGB is very similar. Is allowed to display and see, and a lot of monitors are only RGB and things like that. And so these color spaces are just the way this triangle inside of it is distributed. And sometimes the triangle is wrapped into a circle, and you'll probably see that more often. And that circle of color looks like this. That's why you have it. It's that same triangle, but it's just been laid flat and put in a circle in a way that actually relates to each other. So we're going to talk about more of that in a second. But with Vegas's tools here, as you pick your different color space, like this is saturation and luminance versus hue. And so like a hue, when you hear the word hue, it's what color something is. Saturation is how much of that color exists, and luminance is like how light or dark is that color. So this would be very bright purple, this would be very dark purple, right? White and black. This would be more purpley purple, and this would be more gray purple. So this is the tint, right? Like how much black is or white is in that splotch. And if you notice, the whole color wheel next to it changes, because what I've done is I've changed how I'm picking the color. So I'm focusing on the saturation and luminance of a singular color, but I can move up and down the color wheel on what color I want to focus on the saturation and luminance of. And you can do hue and saturation versus luminance. So this is the different hues and the different saturations of the hue versus how luminescent they are, how much light values are in them. Are they dark or are they bright? And the one on the right here is it is just how see-through something is. And so you can see these color values too up here. You can manually edit these into something else. So if you for example change this number to a 6, you've slightly changed that number, or 55. You've changed the color. So as you're color matching and things like that, you can actually color match websites and stuff that you're making videos for by both matching the color space and the numbers of the color value, the numbers that the artist has given you. So if you're working with a graphic designer, they'll know exactly what color space and stuff they're working in. So these are just different ways you can even separate them out. This is just the color, the saturation, the luminance, and how transparent it is. This is also called the alpha channel. The RGB has the same kind of things where you can group them differently, whatever makes sense to you. And also, when you're doing these kinds of selections and stuff, sometimes you need a little bit more control over a specific area when you're trying to color match things and stuff, and just being able to change these is super helpful. You can do this in Movie Studio and Vegas Pro. So that is color, but I want to also point out you can do the same exact thing with like the color of text. So here we've got the, let's go to lab color is another color space, and you can do the same kinds of color picking and stuff with this. And so this is also super helpful when you're trying to dial in on a color, because a lot of times you're not doing it with that, you're doing it with text. Here's something important too. When you start Vegas, a project, how much color it can display is based off of these right here. Most projects you'll do will either be, if you have an older version, will be in the legacy 8-bit video levels or the 8-bit full range video levels. This is just how much color it can display. And with newer stuff, this now matters. The only time you would need a 32-bit floating point video levels or full range, like the ASUS color space, is when you're doing stuff that actually can deliver on the ASUS color space. Most people's monitors can't even see the ASUS color space. So I'm not actually going to be able to do a lot of explanation of ASUS color space because my monitor doesn't even understand. Like, my monitor has more color range than a lot of other monitors, but I don't have a monitor that's actually qualified to do that kind of color grading. If you do, you can actually get more color values, get more stipulation between the colors, and have a bigger color space. So the ASUS color space is huge, and you have just, you can stipulate on the color more. So that's what that is. A lot of people are just like, turn this on. I only turn on this if you know what you're doing, if you understand why you need to go into the ASUS color space versus stay. But the 8-bit full range level should be plenty good, especially for YouTube and stuff. You're not delivering most things on a full UHD, unless you're like editing something for Netflix or something for an actual like Amazon platform that's actually got a huge variety of delivery formats. That's not something you need to worry about. Different video effects you have for color. There's all sorts of things. There's brightness and contrast. And really, Vegas has like 9 ways to skin the same cat. We'll talk about that more in just a second, but I just want to point out that you can actually, a lot of these same things that you can do in the color grading, you can actually have an individual effect that can do it too, which is very helpful. All right, so the channel blend is something that's a very powerful tool. I don't use it much, but I can tell you a little bit about it. What you can do with the channel blend tool is you can actually take the individual channels of a color and weight it. So let's go to this blue output, because blue is obviously a very big color here, and let's weigh just the blue. And so now you can see I'm turning the blue color green without affecting much of the other image. Now it will affect the rest of the image. It doesn't just isolate colors instantly. But you can see it does give you like a lot of color control, because what you can do is you can actually decide on what kind of the exact color you want to mess with, and you have a dial to mess with it. So that is color blending. Chroma blur is something that people like to use if, let's say we did want to do a green screen on this. That's a chroma keyer. I do have a whole tutorial about chroma keys, so all I'm going to talk about with a chroma key is that a chroma key selects a particular color. Now remember, you can even change the color space you're selecting a color for, and removes it. But that might not work as well when you have a codec that doesn't mix the colors properly. So one thing you can do is go to a chroma blur, and you can actually blur the colors into the other pixels. So for example, let's say you have a codec that doesn't take every single color value of a pixel. The codec just takes an average color value. You can actually blur these color values, but you need to do it on the first of the effects chain. You can blur the color values before you do something that affects color. And then it gives you a little bit more, it might give you a little bit better key. It might give you a little bit worse of a key, depending on what your problem was. But that is just something that is a tool that I want you to be aware of, especially if you're trying to return color into something. Color balance. So this is something that you can do in the color grading panel exactly. This is preserve luminosity, making sure that you do not or can change the actual brightness or darkness of colors. But like you could make the highlights red or more red, or you can make the midtones more red, or you can make the shadow more red. It doesn't keep the changes as you go in between. What it does is, if you wanted to do multiple color balances, you could throw these on the effect chain and then affect different highlights or midtones or shadows different ways. Now you would never do anything like this. This is just extreme so you can see what's happening here. And again, I have a guide all about how to do it the right way if you want to actually make something repaired or better in color. The color corrector, again, is a similar tool. This actually has our familiar color wheels, and what's great about this is, again, sometimes you don't need the whole color grading panel. Sometimes you need just to do some color adjustment to something kind of in the effect chain itself. And so this is just a general color corrector. It's the same, your low colors, your mid colors, and your high colors with the saturation. I mean, you can go black and white, or boom, really pop that saturation. Now, here's the thing about popped saturation, though. A lot of times, if you're going to something that has a restrictive color space, like broadcast TV, you might need to reduce your colors for broadcast colors. And so this broadcast colors thing actually will rein in your colors. So if we go to the color grading panel just for a second, I want you to see kind of the colors when I pop the saturation up on this. Again, we're going to talk about all this in just a second. When I pop the saturation up, you can see here on the vector scope, this is where colors live, and black and white is always going to be right here in the center. Black doesn't show up on the vector scope. White is in the center. But as you increase the saturation, we should see a very, very big blue. Now you'll notice this isn't blue, perfect blue, but it is in the blue direction. So it's this color blue right here. Because what we can do is we can actually affect how much of that blue exists. See how it just pops off the vector scope there? Now the blue is just absolutely, it's hitting a ceiling where it's just piling up on top of itself, leaving. So this is extremely saturated. Some people are like, this is art. It doesn't show up well on most monitors. So avoid it if you can. What the gamma does while I've got this up is another way to increase kind of your bottom floor of brightness. So this is your kind of bottom floor here. Let's double click, returns anything to its normal values. It'll kind of raise your bottom floor of brightness a little bit. And then gain will kind of give you more, it'll give you more of all your values together. So it kind of brightens it up. So gain brightens kind of the whole thing, while gamma kind of brightens from the bottom. And then offset changes where you can see it really well in this waveform right here. It changes where your colors are starting from. So if you change the starting point, you kind of change all the colors. See, so you're bumping up anything past 100% here is white. And anything past 0 is black. And so if you offset dark enough, you turn everything black. And if you offset enough white, you can turn everything white. The color corrector secondary, I've done lots and lots of tutorials about this one specifically too. It's got so much power. There are two things for this particular tutorial I'm going to isolate and talk about. What you can do with this one is you select an effect range. Let's say we just want that blue. We can select that blue, and if we show a mask only of that blue, it'll give us a white mask of that particular color. And if we have that one particular color selected, what you can do is you can rotate that color. Now, in my shirt changing tutorial, I've covered all about how to isolate colors and change colors and highlight colors and things like that, but I just want to point it out here, since this is a general color guide, that this exists. The custom one gives you a few more tools, but I found that this one really gives me everything I need. And so if you want more information about the secondary color corrector, I highly recommend checking that out. But one thing you can do too, let's go desaturate all but reds. You can see here now only the reds are saturated, and if you go to limit hue, you can actually rotate the hue to where like now he's black and white with just the blue. You know, you can change what color is picked to be highlighted. So you can highlight just a singular color, like just that one shade of green, or maybe a wider shade of green if we increase the width. Without getting the blue in there. So now we're starting to get the blue back, see? So it's got a very, very powerful tool. I've got more tutorials specifically for that, so check those out if you're interested in the secondary color corrector. Color curves is just another way to do the same thing. We're going to get... again, color curves are right here too, but we'll talk about what the color grading panel does and what makes it different than these in just a second. But the color curves are a way, so you can see, are you affecting all the colors? Just red, just green, or just blue? So let's just affect green, because that's easy to see. I'm using this particular image of a Korok because it's super easy to see what you're doing. With this, you're affecting, so the histogram here, so now let's talk about a histogram. This is how bright and dark something is. If something's really bright, it's up here. If something's really dark, it's up here. Now you can, I've got this RGB luminance one here because you can see that your blues are really all across the whole spectrum. The reds are all across the whole spectrum. The greens aren't quite, but you can see that we're just affecting the green here. I can actually take it. I can take the top of this color curve, bring it down, and I can actually chop off the green, right? So now it's looking really wonky, but you can see the green itself is disappearing. Now, if you wanted to add more green on the bottom, you could push the green up from the bottom. You can see the color curves work really well with this histogram because you can see exactly what you're doing, like whether you're bumping up the colors right here, but not at the top, right? You can see how this is going to get fatter, and push up a little bit, but I still kind of got it cut down. So you can do some weird things with color curves, but they're a way to get a very, very particular color look, especially if you're color grading. More about that in my color grading video. Color match is a way you can just, let's use this with my less colory stuff. So with color match, this is a way that you can make something match the colors of a particular image. So if you hit this save snapshot to file, you can save a snapshot, or you can copy snapshot to clipboard. So what we can do is save snapshot, copy snapshot to clipboard, and then let's see if we can do a color lookup table here. So now if I go to my video effects and grab this color match, I can drop it here, and then I can select the source image from clipboard, and here's my source image, and then now I can select my target image from clipboard, and then it'll give me the resulting image. Now you can see it definitely tried to color match them, make it very blue and very, you know, it definitely you can see the matching that's happening there. Now you can change the strength of this too. So if I just wanted it to slow, like only add a little bit of it. So it's a poor man's LUT is what this is. It's like a lookup table without a lookup table. So this is a way that you can maybe color match if you're trying to make a documentary and there's a very particular piece of artwork in that documentary that is important. This is a tool that could help you color match your project to that piece of art at different points, like if you're doing graphic design on it or something like NerdWriter. So it's just another tool in your tool belt. So what we're going to do too is we're going to remove some of those right now. Colorization, I have a whole tutorial about that, but essentially it takes black and white footage and makes it color. Way too intense to go into now, but whole tutorials about that. So just want you to know, but that it is here. White balance, go to this white balance effect. Now you would use this no matter what version you have. You drop that on here, and you can actually take this little dropper and select what's supposed to be white. Now, I don't like that selection. That's a little better. On something that's more white, that's still a little bit blue. If you hit Control while you drag this, it won't drag very fast, but you can actually kind of find what you think is the perfect white. So now if we go back to our event pen crop and we select this one here, it looks a lot better. It's definitely got rid of the blues, but it's still too dark. So you can actually go back to your white balance here and then adjust the temperature. And you can actually warm it up by going this direction, or you can cool it down by going this direction. So now we're finally ready to go into the color grading panel. So with Alt-G in the color grading panel, you have input LUTs, and this is where you can input a camera lookup table. You have color wheels where you can do where you can change the lift, gamma, gain, and offset. Now, what lift is just your lows. You also hear that as low. So if I add blue, boom, see the low of my blues just powers up there. With the gamma, it takes the middle of my blues and powers them up there. See, yeah, you can affect it. But one thing you notice with a color wheel, the reason I like the color wheel so much is when you move one color, like if I move something towards blue, I'm moving the other colors down, because when you move towards blue, you're also moving away from yellow and red, and that's what's important to know about a color wheel. With any of these dials, if you hold Control, you can move much slower and get an actual much better result for what you're doing, like that. Ooh, see, that really kind of corrects a lot of the color problems in this particular image very easily. If you need to reset it, you can reset it here. You can change the saturation of each of these, as we covered. That is something different down here. It's changing how much of the color exists in the middle. So you see all these midtones in the vector scope exploding out past the vector scope. That's a bad thing. But that's what you can do, is you can actually take all the midtones and just increase the saturation of just the midtones. So you got the lift, the gamma, the gain, and the offset is everything. So let's say something is blue. Get generators, let's grab blue. Let's look at blue. Okay, so now I'm color grading this particular blue image. But see, the saturation is like off the charts. So what you can do, let's say we wanted it to be just a standard blue, not a completely high oversaturated blue. What you can do actually is go to the hue, saturation, luminance controls. Now this gives you particular control over your color in general. And then I want to talk about this so I can talk about offset, because offset changes everything. So you can see more what offset does in just a second. But with the hue, we can actually rotate the hue. You can see it just moves in a circle around the vector scope here. Let's just make the vector scope bigger. Look at that, see? In a circle. Now the circle is a very lopsided circle, but it moves in a circle nonetheless. So if we drop the saturation, let's rein it in to the middle blue there. Now it's a more neutral looking blue. We can rotate the saturation. Oh, look, it pops into magenta right in the middle, red right in the middle, yellow right in the middle, green right in the middle, and cyan right in the middle. Man, look at that. Isn't that cool, right? So you can be more on the edge of blue here. Really blue, sky blue. But this is just blues that tend to match up with color cards, and that's really cool. So always remember that hues like rotate in a circle. When you remember that, it will help you a ton. The luminance is just how bright something is. So that does change the saturation a little bit, but you can see it doesn't change it forever, because when you get it really dark, all it does is turn it black. And so how much color involved, because you're changing the tint and you're changing the shade of the color. So because you're changing the tint and the shade, you are somewhat messing with the saturation of things. These things don't exist in a vacuum; they exist together. But you can use these together because you're attacking different things. You're going for a different end result. So this is how much brightness is in something, as we talked about earlier. The look LUT is a final LUT, so usually the input LUT is like a color correction LUT, so a lot of times the camera will be a very washed out image if it's got a long raw file with tons of information, and you can have a look LUT, camera LUT to just give you a lookup table that gives you a centered value to start from, a good starting point for your color correction, while the look LUT is a one you can put on top of it that will change the colors again to give you more of a flattened out, some cinematic look or whatever you're looking for, depending on if it's a good look LUT. These aren't magic. None of these LUTs are drag and drop perfect. You can change the strength of how much the LUT overlays as well. All LUTs are talked about in much more detail in my color correction tutorial. This is just a overview of the color tools in Vegas. So when we go back to offset here, I can actually see I can move it offset blue towards red, or offset it to magenta, offset it to green. I just want you to know with the offset, you're kind of moving everything together. So it's a very powerful tool, but it's something that is in overall, it's like how you get rid of a color cast. Like if everything's green and you just move away from the green, like if that's your problem, then you will get rid of green. So that's a great color cast correction tool. Color casting isn't as much of a problem as it used to be with film. The color channels, this is all the same thing, but I don't use them. And here's why. Because it doesn't let you see the ecosystem as well. So you can see in the RGB parade exactly what's happening. If I'm dropping greens, I'm dropping greens. If I'm raising blue, I'm raising blues. And you can do this with the lift gamma. So the lows, middles, and highs, lift gamma and gain. This is the same tools as this. It's just whether or not you want to do it with these dials rather than the color wheels. It's what you're used to. So the independent controls, this is all the saturation, and boom, you can see how it suddenly everything gets more colorful. Let's look at my color card here at the end. You can see the colors really just wow pop. I know the DKK color card is cheap, which is why I have it. It's not good, so I don't recommend it. The saturation, boom, now everything's black and white. So same with exposure. So exposure works on a logarithmic scale. And so exposure is how much light originally got to the lens. You can't change that because you can't change what the camera did, but you can simulate that change. If there was more light when the picture was originally took or less light when the picture was originally took versus the shutter speed and gain and everything else on the image sensor. So you can help simulate a better or a worse exposure or an overexposure and underexposure. Usually you're trying to correct an exposure. So this one was shot a little dark. Exposure would be a great way to make this one look much better. See that? Super easy. And then also levels too. Levels, this controls your darks. You can see in the histogram, I can just crush all the darks down. Usually you just add just a little bit of crush to kind of flatten your blacks out. So with this one, it doesn't need any crushing because it's already the black's already flat. But a lot of times if you have a black that doesn't look actually black, it looks just like a matted gray, you can just kind of boom, pop that up and it'll crush the black color a little bit more. And then the output min is it kind of squashes your whole histogram up, you see right there. And then so it gives you like a minimum darkness, so kind of washed out dreamy look. While the input max will push up your brights brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. It's another way to brighten an image, but it's a good way. This is actually when you increase the input min and decrease the input max, you're actually increasing the contrast in a manual way, which is a tool we talked about earlier. So and the output max does the same thing with the top of the histogram. It can crush it down. So if you want something to have a very dark look, like the top of the histogram was never touched, that is another way to do it. You can bypass the color grading to see what it looks like without it or with it. So let's do something extreme here. Actually, you can't. There we go. We did something extreme. Now we can bypass the color grading to see what it looked like. So it essentially unchecks it from your effect chain without you having to notice. Bezier mask quickly adds a Bezier mask to something, which is awesome because sometimes you want to correct only a piece of the color. And with Bezier mask, you can actually just, with the general options, you can just affect the color grading beforehand. So let's put broadcast colors at the end here. A lot of times you would put broadcast colors right here on your effect chain of the whole project. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to get rid of it now. But with the Bezier mask, now we have it only masking the effect. So now you can actually just color correct just a singular mask. So if you did an independent mask, you could color correct frame by frame just my hand while leaving everything else the exact same. Reset all just does that. It takes everything back to basics. Let's look at the Bezier mask again. See, it actually killed everything off the color chain, which is super helpful because sometimes I just really hate everything I'm doing and I want to destroy it. Export LUT is if you really like the look of something, but people just kind of export LUTs willy-nilly. You would really only export a LUT if you had a raw color, like a really wide color space you were working in, and you really dialed in the colors really well for that shot. So like a camera that shoots in RAW. My camera doesn't shoot in RAW. But let's say I really consistently shoot with the same camera, and I got a really specific color look. I can export that LUT and make it a LUT, which is covered in the color grading tutorial more specifically. I can export that LUT and then drop it on all of my footage and have that as a starting point. LUTs aren't a magic bullet, so you will have to still stipulate from there, but there you go. Pin and underpin, that's just whether or not your color grading tool docks or not. And then exit is another alternate way to leave. That is just a broad overview of the color tools in Vegas. Now, something specific I want to note is while the color grading is on each particular clip, with the, let's say we use color corrector, how it's very similar, I can put it on the clip itself, I can put it on the track itself, or I can put it on the project itself, where I can affect every single thing in the project right here. So I just got rid of it. But that's one of the benefits to having all of these color tools, because this is a great way to have everything all together in a way that creates a LUT. If you're making a LUT, you're exporting the changes from this color table exactly, but from the color grading panel. But this is a great way when you're doing color grading to do a lot of these tools together. But the reason they're separated is because with Vegas's open-ended idea chain, you don't have to. You're not limited to using these just for every event. You can use it on track or whole master bus or whatever you want to do. So the master track. So yeah, so that is color tools in Vegas. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video helped you guys out. Remember, I get a lot more specific on a lot of these tools in other tutorials. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.